25th April 2015, 11:56 a.m. Kathmandu, Nepal. As I was training a group of young customer service professionals, suddenly I felt the earth vibrate vigorously beneath my feet. It wasn't just a small vibration that it started out as. Ultimately, it became a full blown earthquake which measured 7.9 on the Richter scale. That day is a black day in the history of my life. You see, my child, who was then only 7 months old, was at home with the nanny while I was working. I can't actually adequately express the emotions I went through. The taxi ride from my class back home was the longest I have ever been through. I was crying bitter tears and I was feeling hot and cold and uncomfortable at the same time. I reached home to find that my son was safe. However, that day, 8,500 people had lost their lives in Nepal. An earthquake 7.9 on the Richter scale hit Nepal on the 25th of April 2015 at 11:56 a.m. 8,500 people lost their lives. I just said the same thing in two different ways. The first was a story and the second was a report. Which one was more meaningful to you? Which one would you remember more? Which one touched you? Which one connected with you? If you said it was the first one, you're absolutely correct. And that really is the power of stories. Stories help to connect with people. Stories make you feel something, and stories are a great tool for entrepreneurs and professionals to use in their daily lives to make more compelling speeches. Hello everyone, I'm Mannsi Agrawal, and today I'm going to tell you all the wonderful ways that you can use storytelling in your speeches to enhance your professional careers. So before we go further, it's important to understand what exactly is the importance of stories. Stories teach us lessons. All of history that we know and that we believe on is just a group of stories that so many people believe in. Mythology is story. All the stories that we believe in that are religious to us are just a bunch of stories that teach us some lessons for life. Stories also help us to understand empathy. A story about something sad in somebody else's life can help you develop so much empathy inside you. Stories also motivate us. Stories motivate us because when we listen to great stories of great leaders such as Abraham Lincoln or maybe Helen Keller, we are really motivated to take better steps in our life. Stories also help to prove a point. Let's say I were to tell you that I'm a great basketball player. Well, you might believe me. However, if I told you about the one amazing match I played and how we managed to defeat the opponents, you would start believing me just some more. Stories also help you to remember certain things. The story that I just narrated to you about the earthquake, won't that help you remember exactly the pain that I went through? That's because you can feel it so much. Stories also help people connect. Stories, by their very nature, are very human. They're very real. Your experiences and my experiences might be similar, although we may be from completely different parts of the world. Let's say I tell you a story about my grandfather's death. Won't that help you connect? Won't that remind you of somebody you might have lost in your lives? And finally, stories are extremely important for us because stories also motivate us to act, motivate us to take action. And in the next section, I'm going to tell you exactly how you can start working on your own stories that are going to help other people understand you better, understand your brand better, and maybe even take action that supports you in some way or the other. When we use a story in a speech, the placement of the story is extremely important. For example, this entire talk today started off with a story. What did I do? I basically aroused your curiosity. You wanted to know more. You wanted to find out more. Just like that. Think of the story in the beginning of a speech like the trailer of a movie. It should arouse curiosity. People, after they listen to the story, should want to listen to you more and more. The second great place to put a story into a speech is at the end. Right at the end, when you've given all your points, you've stated everything that you had to say. If you end with a story, you manage to create an impact on people. That gives them a direct message that they can take home. That gives them something direct that maybe they can act on. So my second favorite place to put a story in a speech is right at the end. Another great place to put the story in the speech is maybe in the middle. But here, when you use a story, remember your stories should enhance or explain or prove your points. That's why they're effective in the middle of a speech. Also, another great kind of speech is the speech which by itself is a story. An entire story narrated maybe in chronological format could be a great speech. In this section, we are going to discuss the format of stories. While there are many possible formats to any story, my three favorite are chronological, star method, and finally, starting from the height of drama. Let me explain each one to you. Number one, chronological. A chronological is a story which is said from start to end. The events move as they move in time, chronologically. Let me give you an example. Last year I was traveling and my passport was stolen. This is how I would say the story in a chronological method. It was early in the morning as I got out of the airport. I was waiting to discover this new city. I felt a pat on my back. An old lady said, "Do you want to go to the bus stop? I can help you." My friend and me happily agreed. We went to the bus stop with her. She told us which bus to get into. On the bus ride, she kept on and on talking to us. While I found that slightly strange, we gave in because she looked old and feeble. Finally, it was time for us to get out of the bus. I turned, and just as I was getting out of the bus, I felt a tug on the back of my t-shirt. I turned around and I saw some girl was putting something inside her bag. I knew something was wrong. I ran behind these girls who jumped out of the bus before I could, and I caught them. And when I checked my own bag, I realized my passport, my phone, and a lot of other documents were missing. That's when I knew something was really wrong. Upon searching these girls, the police found nothing, and after 2 days, we finally gave up on the quest to find my passport. However, in spite of all the troubles, I still managed to have a great stay in that city. I got temporary documents from the embassy of my country, and then finally I managed to come back home safe and sound. So, what did you see? I just said the story in chronological method, which means starting from the beginning, going till the end. Let me now say this story in a different way. Now I'm going to use the STAR method. The STAR method basically stands for situation, task, action, result. And this method is extremely powerful if you are looking at inspiring somebody. Let me give you an example. The situation was this. I was on the streets of this new city and I had just found out that I had been robbed. My passport, my only piece of identity, had been taken away from me along with my phone and other documents. I was devastated. I felt my heart thumping inside me. However, I knew that I had a task at hand. What I had to do was do my due diligence, get all my paperwork ready, and make sure that I was safe. And that's exactly what I did. Over the next 2 days, I went to and fro from police stations to the embassy of my own country, speaking to the consulars and doing whatever I could in order to ensure that I was safe in a foreign country. The result was that I managed to get all my paperwork on time, and in spite of the little hiccup we had in the beginning, I still had a great time at my vacation. So what did I do? I gave you some kind of hope. I told you about the struggles I went through. I told you about the situation. I told you about what the task was for me. I told you about the actions I took. And finally, I told you about the result of the action. And this motivated you that you also can do it. That's why the STAR method is extremely effective when we want to motivate somebody. My third favorite method of storytelling is something called starting at the height of drama. This is when a story really grabs somebody's attention. Let's say I start the same story like this. My heart was thumping as I ran behind that girl. I knew she had taken something out of my bag. I just didn't know what it was yet. I finally managed to catch up to her and I caught her collar and I said, "Listen, I know you did something." I could feel the tug on the back of my shoulder. She pretended not to speak English. However, upon checking my bag, I realized my passport, my phone, and some other documents were missing. The next 2 days were full of flurry and full of a lot of excitement and chaos and a lot of pain and a lot of distress. However, at the end of it, I managed to solve all my problems and I realized that that flux of emotion that I was feeling was actually just fear. and I managed to overcome my fear. So, what did I do? I started the story at the heights of drama, and then I took you, and then I sort of managed to conclude and resolve the story. This is a great method to format your story if you want to instantly grab the attention of your audience members. I just shared 3 methods of sharing a story: chronological, using the star method, and starting at the heights of drama. However, this is not the end. There are many, many different ways of starting a story. In fact, maybe you could think about combining 2 or 3 different methods to make your story as powerful and as impactful as you want. So now let's understand exactly how we can make our stories more powerful, how we can make them more impactful. There are many, many methods of doing this. Let me begin. Number 1, make them vivid. Describe whatever you can. Describe it in great detail. Remember the story of the earthquake? Remember I told you that I was training a group of customer service professionals? What I basically was doing was I was ensuring that you knew exactly what was happening, that you could picturize it as it happened. Remember I told you about what started as a vibration and finally became a huge earthquake? Again, you could imagine that feeling. You could picturize it as it unfolded in front of you. That's the first thing you must do. Use vivid details so that the other person can imagine the story as it unfolds, almost like a movie. Number 2, try and involve all senses. It's extremely important that you can involve all senses in a story. Let me tell you how. I cried bitter tears. Bitter, you can taste. It was a cold day as I woke up and looked out of the window. The bright sun rays illuminated my room. What am I doing? Cold, you feel something. The bright sun rays, you can see the sun rays. Talk about emotions, talk about all the senses. Use all your 5 senses, because that way the people who are listening to your story will be able to follow and will be able to relate to it a lot more. The next thing we can do to make our stories even more realistic is give a time and place marker. Remember the story which I had in the beginning about the earthquake? I told you about the exact time, the exact date, and where it happened. This gave you a sense of orientation. This made you feel that you could understand the background and the setting of the story a lot better. Next, try and develop characters, maybe give them voices and dialogues. Dialogues are really truly powerful. Although I still haven't had a chance to show you an example of dialogues, dialogues really make any story come alive. Try and do the accent. How does this person speak? Do they have a stammer? The moment you add dialogues, the moment you pepper your story with dialogues, what you are really doing is you are creating so much more impact in your stories. Next, try and use a personal story. Personal stories always work well. The reason personal stories work well is because people are hearing your story from your own words. This way they connect to you just so much better. The story that happened with my passport is my own story. The earthquake story is my own story. And finally, please remember, humor is a great tool to use in stories. Every time you manage to use humor in your stories, you make the people come just a step closer to you. So in conclusion, I'd just like to say, stories are wonderful. They are everywhere. And as professionals, as people who have a voice, it is our job to immortalize our stories. It is our job to make our stories available to the world. So go out there, share some amazing stories about you. They might help you in more ways than you can ever imagine.